Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Robert Jaquay. On today's show, we're going to be talking to Erika Sanger, who is the Director of Education at the Albany Institute of History and Art. The Institute is one of the oldest museums in the country. It's rich with treasures that focus on the history, art, and culture of Albany and the Upper Hudson region. Let's go meet our guest and find out more. Erika, I want to thank you very much for being my guest today. Before we start going into detail about the Institute and the collections and the programs, I'd like to have you give our guests an idea of your background, where you came from and how you got here.
Sure. I've been in Albany just a little over 2 years. Before that, I had spent a nice chunk of time down in North Carolina at a place called Penland School of Crafts, which is one of our nation's oldest and largest craft schools. It's about 40 buildings on 400 acres of land up in the Blue Ridge, so it's absolutely gorgeous.
I bet it is.
From there, I went to the Asheville Art Museum, which is a museum of 20th century American art with a focus on the work of artists from Black Mountain College. Before I went to North Carolina, I was at the Brooklyn Museum. Before the Brooklyn Museum, I was at the New York Historical Society. Prior to that, I was at the Jewish Museum. And I got a master's degree in photography from NYU in conjunction with the International Center of Photography. So I started my life in museum work at ICP.
Okay, and you have an MFA as well, or BFA?
I have a BFA,
BFA? Okay.
From Clark University.
And you come from New York City?
And I come from New York City, yes.
Love it. So why the Institute? What about the Institute that attracted you?
The Albany Institute's collections are just phenomenal. There's over 500 years of material related to the art and culture and history of the Upper Hudson Valley. And so we can trace the history of the people who have lived here. And we can understand our role in this big shared history by looking at the documents and materials in the library, the material, culture, artifacts and objects, and the fine art in the collections.
Now, we talk about it being one of the oldest museums in the country, and yet it's called the Albany Institute. So can you help us with that? I mean, is it museum, institute? What does it mean?
When the Albany Institute was thinking about changing their name, which has happened several times, everyone really feels connected to the idea of institute because of the organization's mission related to education, and they did not want to lose that. So it is a museum and library of American art and culture with a very strong focus on the education components.
And it goes under the banner of being the Museum for the 21st Century.
Museum for the 21st Century. We're trying to open ourselves up to learning in the 20th century, 21st century, to lifelong learners, to showing learning in different ways, and to look towards our future and from learning about our past.
I think it's exciting. We're going to talk more about the programs itself and
Yes.
the educational programs, but it's quite possible that people haven't ever visited the Institute. So we have a bit of a slideshow that you're going to give some narration to, and we'll project the images to give a start what it looks like and some of the aspects of the collection as well.
Sure. The new Albany Institute of History and Art reopened after an $18 million renovation and expansion in September of 2001. They created a glass atrium which married a late 19th century home to a 1907 building that was created specifically for the Albany Institute, and then added onto the back of that building HVAC controlled storage that really protected the collections for the first time in its history.
Excuse me, it must have been quite a feat too, because as I'm seeing it, you really were confined on all sides by what was already there. So.
Right. The lot that the two buildings are on, it's a double lot and goes back to the back of the block, really determined what the expansion would look like. And when you move from one building into the 2001 structure into the other building, it really is different floor levels and matching ceilings and all that other interesting architectural things that happen in the building.
Okay, we've seen the outside. Now we're gonna go inside.
This is the museum sculpture court. If you had been at the museum prior to its opening in 2001, if you were there, let's say in the mid-1990s, you would have entered the building from behind the statue of the Archangel that you see there now. The marble version of that statue is at the Albany Rural Cemetery. You would have entered from there and then gone into the museum in various ways. The new entrance is at that new atrium entrance. The galleries were refurbished, new lighting, new control for air conditioning and things like that, which enabled the Albany Institute to attract exhibitions from around the world.
Now, there's a real need for climate control in an environment. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. You have to guarantee the safety and security of paintings if they're coming from the Louvre, if they're coming from
I would hope so, right?
Yes, absolutely. And until that time, we were not eligible for those types of exhibitions. Very important move. This is our new galleries on our second floor and our new galleries on our third floor, which were positioned and designed to look like a 19th century salon-style painting room on purpose to recreate the effect of the 19th century museum. We're very well known for our collection of Hudson River School materials. And
Okay, and I just want to ask, can you talk about what is the Hudson River School?
The Hudson River School is the name for a group of artists who looked at the American landscape as a legitimate subject for their painting. Before that time, if you had a painting in your home, it would have been a portrait. It might have been an illustration of a biblical story in some way, or it might have been an ancestral home. This group of painters looked at America, looked at our land, looked at where we were, and began painting from there. So it's our first real American school of painting.
Did they just happen to coincide? Did they know one another? Or, I mean, did they say, we're going to create the Hudson River School? I don't think so.
I would say that as now, 200 years ago, there were groups of artists gathering in New York City because of what was available in New York City and the patronage. When the paths up the Hudson became more navigable with the steamboat and the railways, and people could travel. It became very attractive, and people began to hear about the Catskills and the river and begun to travel. And a lot of the artists' paintings contributed to that tourism up into this area.
They're glorious. They're absolutely glorious to look at. I mean, you really feel like you're there. So
yes.
Continue.
So on the left-hand side, we have a daguerreotype of the artist Thomas Cole, one of the founders of the Hudson River School. That was taken by the photographer Matthew Brady in 1845, just a couple of years before he died. And on the right-hand side, one of Thomas Cole's paintings that he made when he was studying in Italy. There were also no art schools in the United States at the time, and if one needed to study, one went and apprenticed themselves to another artist here in the United States, or went back to Europe to learn how to paint. Another founder of the Hudson River School is Frederick Edwin Church, and many people know him for his home Olana,
Right.
which is also located very close by here. And this painting is titled Morning, looking east over the Hudson Valley from the Catskill Mountains. And the monumental vista that this painting depicts is almost in contrast to its size. It's a very small work that contains a tremendous amount of power for its size.
Now you partner with other art museums and institutes, and you get art in. I imagine you loan this kind of art out because these exhibitions have been done elsewhere. And there's,
Absolutely.
I know Munson Williams. I still think, do they still have the Coles there, or did they used to
They
have
do.
the four big ones?
The Voyage of
Right,
Life
right.
is there. Yes, and in fact, one of our paintings by Durand will be leaving us next month in an exhibition that's going to be traveling around the United States. So things come and go all the time. You never know what you're going to see on view when you get there. Yeah. Second generation Hudson River School. So the people that studied with Cole and Church and Durand include the Hart brothers, and this is work by William Hart. And there's a sketch in the upper left-hand corner. And then on the right is a view of Albany from the mid-19th century. And then another second generation is an artist named Homer Dodge Martin. And this is a painting of Storm King on the Hudson. And it's very interesting to look at this painting of Storm King. And if you went to that same place now and looked, it would be incredible how the land has changed.
Has changed.
Because of development. So we're also collecting art all the time. This is a painting by the artist Don Nice, a contemporary Hudson River School painter. We had a one-man show of his 2.5 years ago. And he uses contemporary cultural symbols in his painting to talk about the importance of the river and ecology and being good stewards of our land.
Now, do actually someone goes out and looks for these kind of things, or just happens on them? Or?
And things come to us, and we have people who know what we're interested in, what our focus is in. So works come to us through gift, through purchase, through an estate that might leave things to the Institute, many different ways. We also have 3 mummies.
The mummies.
The mummies. We have a man and a woman and a dog that everyone thought was a cat until a number of years ago when it was CAT scanned and found to be a 7-month-old puppy, not a small cat. And we got tremendous help from Albany Medical Center for doing that for us. But here we have a group of school kids looking at the mummy, and on the left a detail from the coffin, which is just a beautiful wooden coffin.
Always a draw.
Always
a draw.
Always a draw. I think last year we had almost 700 6th graders come in to see the mummy. So we have objects of material culture, things that people used throughout history, glass bottles and ceramic casks. We have silver made here in Albany is one of our focuses of collecting. These are 2 late 18th century pieces made here in Albany. And clothing, women's clothes, men's clothes, uniforms, wedding dresses, all things like that. We have portraits. On the right-hand side is a portrait of Everett Wendell, who's one of the first people to set up a sawmill on the banks of the Hudson. And on the left-hand side, a former governor of New York who went on to become president of the United States.
Ask me the question.
And one of my favorite trivia questions is, who is the only president who spoke a language other than English in the White House?
And I drew a blank.
And you drew a blank, and the answer is Martin Van Buren, who spoke Dutch amongst his family when he was at home. And so that really shows in a great way the Dutch influence in our area and how that has carried on through the ages. Other ways that we have kind of collect our Dutch heritage is a window from the First Reformed Dutch Church of Albany, and on the right, one of a set of 12 chairs that was stamped from the Rensselaers. We have a Dutch chest on chest, and we say it was japanned, in that it was the layers of different resin that they use on a lot of Japanese art was to create the decoration on it. And Orientalism became tremendously popular in Holland at that time. And this piece was so valuable that it traveled with the family, from Europe to here in the 17th century, back to Europe in the 18th century, and then back here before it came into the collection pretty recently, within the last 20 years.
It's a beautiful piece.
It's just gorgeous, absolutely.
Other
Pictures that show our interaction with Europe are the 4 Indian kings. This is a mezzotint, a type of engraving that was created in England when 4 tribal leaders of the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois went to meet the queen at the time. And they're all in black because she died, and they're all in their mourning clothes. So we have several images of this group of men who went to England to meet the queen. We have views of Albany from all times throughout its history. These are 2 views of an artist named James Yates, who created them in the 1840s, remembering what the city was like when he was a child. So this is showing Albany about 1805.
Okay.
And by 1840, the city had changed. And because there was, photography had yet to be invented, the only way to record this history was for people to record their memories, both in writing and in pictures. And then this is a photograph of the city from about 100 years later, not too much far in time. You could see the real mix of cars, that there are 4 Model A's still around, but newer models coming in as well.
Now, is there a photography collection? I mean, do you have?
There
is, okay.
There is. The photography collection is housed within the library collections. There are images going back to the 1840s, the late 1840s. There's some wonderful images of the Civil War reunions and Civil War soldiers, all the way through Albany, as it was documented before the plaza was built. All the way through to contemporary photographs of the city.
We're going to talk about the library a little bit later, so keep going.
It's coming.
Yeah, okay.
These are 2 sculptures that you could actually not see at the Albany Institute. They're on loan to the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C.
Oh, really?
And they asked for them specifically for the reopening of the National Portrait Gallery, and I went down and saw them there. They're at the end of a long hall with the portrait of Lincoln in between these 2. These sculptures by John Rogers were the first really mass-produced art in the country. People would buy them. They're about, so high. And they were cast in plaster and then painted on. These 2 directly relate to the Civil War. The one on the left is called Taking the Oath, and it depicts the oath that the Southern soldiers had to take after the war to be readmitted as citizens to the United States. And on the right-hand side is called The Fugitive Story, and it's an escaped slave pleading the group of abolitionists for her safety.
Now, they were mass-produced, but I mean, are they rare now? I mean,
they are, because they're plaster. They have not lasted
Okay.
as long as others might have lasted. There are bits and pieces in many different collections,
Okay.
but these 2, I guess, are among the best in terms of their condition. So the National Portrait Gallery came to us instead of another institution that might have
Great.
another copy, but it might be chipped
Yep.
or it might be,
Wonderful.
I brought a number of things from the library collections.
Okay, yes, of course I'm going to want to know about the library.
right.
Is it considered a research library
It is.
predominantly?
Yes, it's
Okay.
not a circulating library.
All right.
It is open to the general public on Thursday afternoons and all other times by appointment.
Okay.
And it contains incredible treasures, from diaries and manuscripts and the photographs and broadsides and ephemera and newspapers. One of the wonderful things are the 18th century newspapers were printed on cotton rag, not on wood pulp. And so they're in much better condition. You can read an 18th century newspaper, whereas the one in the 1950s, you lift the corner and it falls apart.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
There's some nice old newspapers
That's true.
there. This is a print by an artist named Amos Doolittle that depicts the Battle of Lexington on April 19th, 1775. And Amos Doolittle was at the Battle of Lexington. And it's wonderful because you could see the English marching into the square and, as they say, the rebel armies, attacking. And very clearly he has labeled General Pitcairn and who the other, and what the buildings are, and other things that we have from the Revolutionary War period. On the left is a map that was printed in London in 1780, which shows the rebel army marching and General Burgoyne's positions as he's about to win the battle. And on the right-hand side, we have Burgoyne surrendering. The year before the map was printed in London. So time, took a little while.
Right.
It took a little while. We didn't have cell phones or internet that could send a message back to England. We recently came across some examples of money.
I think this is fascinating. This is
printed in 1776 in Philadelphia. And it really shows the leap of faith that the people who were leading the government in 1776 asked the colonists to make. Have faith in our country that this little piece of paper is going to be worth something and will have value. Benjamin Franklin designed the country's first money. This is not a piece that came from Benjamin Franklin's printing house, because very soon after he was printing all the money, he saw it was taking too much time, and he really wanted to be back involved in what was going on politically. So he sold the rights to print money to another printer in Philadelphia. And so this is from that printer's.
It's beautiful.
They're wonderful, wonderful objects. We have two great letters that show how the Revolutionary War impacted the city of Albany. And even though the battles went right by us and stopped short of us, the left-hand side letter is giving permission for the quartermaster general to take all of the lead out of the window sashes of people's homes in the city. Now we use caulk. At that point in time, the glass was held on the windows with lead.
Right.
And they took the lead out of the windows and they did what with it? They made ammunition. They made bullets. They melted it all down. So this shows that by July of 1777, their stores of ammunition and guns were already beginning to be on the wane. That was from July of 1777. Just a couple of months later, at the beginning of October that year, the snow fell very early. And the battles ceased, and men were left in position on the battlements. They were wounded in hospitals, including the hospital here in Albany. And the letter is requesting that Colonel Lewis send all the men who were at the battens at Queemans, the letter here is spelled T-H, as in Tweemans, and ask them to cut firewood, because there's not a stick left at the hospital. So the snow came so early that no one had time to prepare for winter that year, and the wounded men were in the hospital here freezing. So the people who were not fighting could go cut the wood and deliver it up to the hospital here. So 2 great letters. We do a lot of work with teachers and teacher training. On the left is a picture of teachers doing a document workshop and showing them ways that they can work with primary resources with their students, which has become such an important part of education. And some art teachers who got to experiment with new materials.
Now, do you have, I mean, you have a curriculum program, you have times of the year, the summer or whatever have you, where you offer
They can, anyone can come in by appointment.
Okay.
We have a set of documents for different grade levels. We do it in combination with other things, so, you know, small groups come into the library at a time, so maybe while 10 students are in the library, another 10 are in the art studio and another 10 are in the exhibition.
Okay.
And we teach them how to look at the documents and what to look for and things like that. We do programs for families, programs that are specifically designed for children and their accompanying adults.
Oh, wonderful. Good.
So that the adults get involved as much as the kids do. I can't tell you the number of times I hear, "Daddy, let me," because Daddy gets so involved in the making and the doing, and we don't have very many creative experiences as adults anymore in our culture. And it's a good way for children to get involved with their kids, but also allow themselves that time for play and creativity.
Yeah. You publish
yes.
What is it called? A magazine?
A magazine, a newsletter, a
bulletin.
bulletin.
And you have a calendar in that, so you
Yes.
have a regular routine of having these kind of programs offered.
We do.
During any given month, certain days of the week, whatever have
It's about 2 Saturdays a month. We do storytelling and art making in the morning for younger children under the age of 6, and in the afternoon for children and adults, usually ages 6 to 12 and up. We do some gallery activities and some art making. We are doing 5 or 6 big family festivals a year. The next one is on March 22nd.
Okay.
And then there are other special programs throughout the year that members and non-members can take advantage of.
Busy place. It looks like a busy place. Yes.
Oh, yes. And we probably had a couple of hundred kids in this morning alone. We invite local artists to come and talk about their work, especially when we have exhibitions up. This is the artist Thomas Locker talking about the paintings that he created about the Hudson River for one of the books that he did. We also do work with local community groups. This is the STOP group, the Student Theater Outreach Project of our local NAACP. And Alan Weeks, who is Broadway and film actor, works with these kids and teaches them dance and drumming, and it's really exciting. They've performed a number of times in recent years.
So do you have a because you have also a concert I saw in the bulletin, or
Yes.
somebody's, do you have a
Yes.
performance space itself?
We have a space that is used for performance and lecture. It's kind of a multi-use
Okay.
space. And we also do performance in our galleries, which is nice. It can fit fewer people, but it's a great space to hear music in. We have partnerships with a lot of the local school districts, including the Roman Catholic Diocese of Albany, and we have grants that cover their ability to come to the museum during the year, even from as far away as Herkimer.
Really?
They come up. And we also work with community groups who are, for instance, reenactors. You know, people who are interested in history and make their own clothes and dress up. And this was a group of reenactors from a couple of summers ago who were celebrating Lord Howe and the French and Indian War. And on the right-hand side, you can see the reenactors taking pictures of a hat that they use as a reference to design
Dye their own hats.
their own hats.
They're really into it. It looks like it.
They are so into it. I can't tell you. We have school kids from all over We use hands-on objects, reproductions, so the kids can, feel what a foot warmer feels like or a beaver fur and understand why that's important to our history. We also work with very young children, teaching the elements of art and the elements of history and why history is important. And we've recently, within the last 5 or 6 years now, have been using video conference technology to reach out to classrooms all around the country. And even in England and France, we've been doing some
That is so terrific.
broadcasting across the pond, as they say, right? So it's almost doubling the number of people that we're serving through those programs.
And you also have a connection with the libraries as well.
We do. We're working, we do work with the Queens Public Library down in New York City. And we've been using video conferencing with them in an after-school program for what they call New Americans, to learn about American history. And that's really exciting
They have
for
an
us.
extraordinarily diverse community there. I mean, I
do.
can't begin. I don't even know how many, but it's
They
so
do.
much
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
culture and ethnic
I think
groups.
one of the last things I heard is one of the public schools affiliated with that library, there are 80 different languages
Yep.
spoken. So if that gives you an
That's an idea, right.
right, of the diversity. And I just thought I would end with a couple of images of some ceramics, some pottery from our current exhibition on the work of Paul Cushman, who was an early 19th century Albany potter. And his pottery and factory was really at the forefront of the industrialization of Albany and bringing people here to work and growing the city.
So you have your permanent collections,
We do.
and then you have your exhibitions where you have things that focus on, like right here with the pottery
With the
or a
pottery,
particular aspect of art.
Right. And traveling exhibitions like we had last year, the exhibition from the Petrie Museum in London of ancient Egyptian art and artifacts. So we have a rotating schedule of special exhibitions.
And you're doing something, is it 2007? I was looking through the history, and there was another celebration of this, of Fulton's steamship. So that's
are.
coming up, right?
That is. It will be opening very shortly at the end of March.
Okay.
We'll be celebrating the 200th anniversary of Robert Fulton launching the steamboat. And that's all leading up to 2009 with the quadricentennial celebration of Hudson.
There you
So
go.
We're all,
Right,
working
Works
towards
together.
that. Yeah.
Now, people, learn about the place, especially if they become a member.
Yes.
There is a membership, so we want to talk a little bit about memberships. I mean, we can just say you can get in touch
Sure.
with the web page, through the
Yes.
web page, and find out about becoming a member. There's
Right.
definite advantages to being a member.
Absolutely.
But you're obviously open to the public. You do have an admission charge, but
do. We do.
it's common these days. So I certainly would encourage people to become members.
Yes.
And also just go there. I think people. Do you still have the tree every year? Or is that stopped?
The
Festival of Trees?
No, not
anymore. Okay,
We,
that used to be the big draw.
Actually, the last 2 years, we have gotten local bank, M&T Bank, has sponsored us to open up the doors for free to the museum.
Excellent.
For the whole weekend. So we've taken our resources that we used to spend on the Festival of Trees, which you had to pay admission
Right.
for, and now kind of opened the doors to the community with those same resources and made the institution open for free on Thanksgiving weekend.
That surely is terrific.
Yeah.
And if you become a member, do you get Panorama? Is that part
You
of the
do.
the
You
package?
get panorama. You get free admission. You get a discount in the museum shop, which is great. A lot of our family programs are free with museum admission, which means they're also free to members. So you can come and learn with your children.
Now, if you want to explore now, you have a wonderful web page. So
Yes,
let's
we
give
do.
the web address.
The web address is www.albanyinstitute, all one word, .org.
Okay, and I really recommend people go to it because I got so much information, I could probably talk for days about it, but I won't. You also have a travel program I mean, there's an opportunity for people to take a trip, a small group of people to go to, this one is Egypt,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, they're doing travel trips to Egypt. We've done travel trips locally and travel trips to Manhattan and as far away as Egypt.
How wonderful, how wonderful. Well, we're at the end of our time today, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
Well, I would just encourage people, if they've not come and seen the new building, to come and see. And there's really exciting exhibitions now. So I'd encourage them to come and visit.
Terrific. And thanks so much
Thank
again for
you.
coming. And thanks for joining me on Getting to Know You. I hope you liked today's show and will join us next week. So until then, have a good one.